Greetings, fellow Filipinos against corruption and kleptocracy or PAC. Did you know that corruptors, embezzlers, thieves and kleptos have already figured out the way to beat most Philippines' corruption laws?
Did you also know that we can turn the table on these people and win the fight against corruption in the Philippines?
Today is the start of your journey in exploring some exciting and radical ideas that will change the culture of corruption in our beloved country, the Philippines. The goal of this journey is to explore new and radical ideas to eradicate corruption in the Philippines. I know this may sound impossible, but it can be done.
We have the power to initiate change. The power is already in our hands.
Let's explore this power together.
The masked face that you are seeing now is our faces when corruption in our country is discussed.
We were never a part of any meaningful conversation about corruption in our country. We have near zero impact on any solution to get rid of the Philippines of corruption. We are faceless and nameless in our sufferings due to corruption. The masked face that you are looking at is also a look of silence. The only voice that we have is the voice of pain and agony as victims of corruption. In our hearts of hearts, we Filipinos believe that we live in a democracy. We see ourselves as part of a democratic institution.
The same institution that we believe will protect us. But think again. To get a better understanding of the current form of Philippine government, let's check out the meaning of the word kleptocracy. Let's compare and contrast kleptocracy with democracy. You decide if we are really in a democracy or a kleptocracy.
The common meaning of kleptocracy is that it is a form of government whose corrupt leaders or kleptocrats use their political power to expropriate or steal the wealth of the people and land that they govern by embezzling or misappropriating government funds at the expense of wider population.
In a kleptocracy, corrupt politicians enrich themselves secretly outside the rule of law through kickbacks, bribes, or simply directing government funds to themselves or their associates. Corruption is most common in kleptocracies. It is a form of a criminal offense that is undertaken by a person or an organization that is entrusted in a position of authority to acquire illicit benefits or abuse power for one's gain.
Based on the meaning of kleptocracy, you can examine the current form of Philippine government.
I will leave it up to your good judgment to decide if the Philippines is really a democracy or a kleptocracy. I am convinced that the Philippines is already a form of kleptocracy.
The realities in our current form of government check all the boxes on the description of the word kleptocracy.
Corruption is so pervasive in the Philippines.
However, we still could not say with 100% certainty that the Philippines is already a total kleptocracy.
We still have incorruptible government officials that really want to serve the people. They have their hearts in the right place. We have more incorruptible government officials, I can tell you that.
Watch and listen to the news. You will hear that people in power, mostly from the government, are being investigated for some forms of corruption or another.
Even the law enforcement organizations in the country like the local police, army, navy, government institutions like the Bureau of Custom, Bureau of Internal Revenue, and many more.
Most of these investigations are even televised.
All these investigations point to corruption.
Most of us already surrendered to corruption.
We already admitted that corruption is a way of life in the Philippines. We normalize corruption over time.
We became numb on corruptions. It should not be this way.
Fellow Packers, let us talk about ideas that we can express as private citizens to bring down or beat corruption in our country. Ideas that we can control and turn into laws.
If we are in control, our chances of success in beating or bringing down corruption are much better. No one can control our ideas.
We have to focus on ideas and peaceful actions that we can control.
We need to take matters into our own hands.
I'd like to emphasize the word peaceful in the fight against corruption.
All these years that we relied on our government officials in the fight against corruption, nothing has happened.
They were not able to take down corruption in our country.
Most of the time, corruption involves high-level elected or appointed government officials, even involving famous political names or families in the country that we thought were incorruptible because they were rich already.
Some of them even ran on anti-corruption political platform, but eventually became corrupt themselves.
We have to ask ourselves, why is it that these government officials have not been able to eradicate corruption in our country? Most of them talk the talk about corruption, but could not walk the walk.
The only explanation that one can think of is that these politicians, with the power to change the system, benefit from the way it currently works.
Once they became a part of the political system, they too benefit from corruption either directly or indirectly. Some newly elected politicians initially showed their desire to really fight corruption, but eventually, they too also gave up. They found out that they were faced with a wall of corrupt politicians ready to close down on them.
And very quickly, they got eaten up by their corrupt environment.
These corrupt government officials will almost always gang up on their fellow politicians who desire to improve or change the current corrupt systems that we have.
Or they will find a way to give honest politicians an appearance of being corrupt to put doubts in the public's mind about these honest politicians.
Once these good-intentioned politicians gave up, a victory against corruption became just another pipe dream for the Filipinos. We have to understand that corruption has been embedded deep in the fabric of our institution. We are talking about at least 450 years of corrupt practices by those in power,
going as far back as the time when we were colonized by Spain.
Because corruption has been so ingrained in the fabric of our nation, any victory against corruption would be a Pyrrhic victory, meaning it will be a victory that will be achieved at such a great cost that it is essentially a defeat. A Pyrrhic victory against corruption will cost massive changes in the government structures. It will possibly divide the nation.
We will lose all corrupt government officials, men of the armed forces like the Army, Navy, and Air Force.
We will also lose corrupt government officials in most branches of the government, like the legislative, judiciary, and even the executive branch. There are really strong possibilities that a total victory against corruption will cost a lot for the country. Those who really understand corruption in the Philippines knew the negative impact on the country if corruption is totally defeated. So, they just gave up as well. Again, corruption was normalized and became acceptable to them. But there is hope. We, the citizens, can continue to fight corruption since we are the most affected by it. We cannot give up. Remember this: the voice of the people is the voice of God. We can initiate radical, but practical ideas to improve the corruption situation in the Philippines. And we will do it in a peaceful way. Our ideas will force those who have the power to act, those who are tasked to amend current corruption laws, or enact new laws to stop corruption. The current Philippine laws on corruption are not working, and there are many of these laws. New laws must be enacted, and these new laws must be radical.
These new laws must be dictated by the people, not by lawmakers that are already part of kleptocracy and benefiting from it.
These new corruption laws must reflect the will of the Filipino people. All of us must put greater pressure on the lawmakers. If we unite our voices in a peaceful way, change will happen, and before we knew it, corruption will be a thing of the past for the Filipinos.
Our whispers will become a roar if we unite.
I need to emphasize that there are still good politicians in the Philippines. We have to remember this, since we will tap in the services of these good politicians going forward. And we know who these good politicians are. We know where to find them. In the coming episodes of KleptoStop.Philippines, and there will be at least 20 of these episodes, various ideas on eradicating or defeating corruption in the Philippines will be presented.
Most of these ideas already worked in other countries in Africa and even Asia. I am telling you now, these ideas are radical, intense, and yet practical in fighting corruption. These ideas will be up for discussions amongst us. This is a call for civil discourse or conversation.
Fellow packers or pioneers against corruption and kleptocracy. See you in the next episodes of KleptoStop.Philippines. Be well. Be blessed.